Time now for our Entre Nous segment. Today we're going to focus on one of France's most famous speeches, that is the Appeal of June the 18th. Solange Moujon joins me in the studio now for more on this. Solange, so for our viewers who don't know of it, what exactly was that speech?
Well, this call or appeal is so anchored in French history and in society that it is synonymous with the date. It even symbolizes France's ethos of resistance, its fighting spirit. You can even say, c'est le 18 juin, it's the 18th of June, and people will automatically think of this speech. It often simply goes by the name l'appel, or the appeal, the call. So what is it? Well, it is the first speech that General de Gaulle made from London on the BBC radio. He would do some 70 speeches on British radio. It is considered the cornerstone and start of the French resistance in World War II. It is actually a response to Maréchal Pétain's radio address on the 17th of June, 1940, so the day before, for the French to capitulate and to cease fighting the Germans. Again, this was one of France's darkest hours in the war. All felt lost. And so de Gaulle's speech, which essentially said, France is not alone, we will fight, it was a beacon of hope. So that's the general history of it. But in the past 85 years, it has become much more than that. Already on June 18th, 1945, when thousands gathered for a victory parade in Paris, it had a special significance.
The June 18th of victory. If we, like our allies, can proclaim our victory today, it is thanks to this same day 5 years ago that we owe Victory Day. It's on June 18th, 1940 that France was resurrected, because one man on that day, when the strongest surrendered, refused to accept death, because one man felt it was necessary, in the name of all, to say no to that fate.
So, Solange, the symbolism of the speech itself, the text of the speech, was well established, but the actual radio address itself is much more of an enigma.
Yeah, what was actually said is a bit of a mystery, or it was until recently. And this is where the appeal of June 18th becomes even more fascinating and filled with sort of half-truths and falsehoods. No recording of the speech exists. Why? Well, there are multiple theories on this. De Gaulle was not yet well known at the time. He just arrived the day before in London. The BBC journalists had no idea that this would be the speech, or perhaps a recording was made and destroyed in the war. Some even say that actually de Gaulle and the French resistance would later sort of capitalize on this absence of a transcript and recording, allowing another speech, one made on June 22nd, to be considered the one. Now, this is because, in part, it was less redacted, and the writing was even more fine-tuned. Even today, you can find on the Élysées YouTube channel the 22nd of June speech marked as the 18th of June one. And famous flyers that were posted around London in 1940 of this 18th of June appeal, well, they aren't actually what he said. Same with the famous photos of the speech. It is from a later date. Historians have even found that very few people actually listened to it. Some, though, say that they remember that night.
I told myself we mustn't stop fighting, because despite everything, there's still a heart among the French people, people who want to continue the fight.
My grandfather reacted by saying, you hear this, the war isn't over, there's still hope, that's the future. Immediately we became Gaullistes.
Now, for decades, we don't really know, for decades at least, we didn't really know exactly what de Gaulle said. There was no proof. Until about 2 years ago, Le Monde investigated and found a German transcript in the Swiss Federal Archives. They translated it back into French, and then with artificial intelligence, they essentially made a deepfake, which we're about to hear a little snippet of. Again, this is not really Charles de Gaulle's voice.
Mais le dernier mot est-il dit? L'espérance doit-elle disparaître? La défaite est-elle définitive? Non.
Now, a final piece of the puzzle of this lost radio speech has just surfaced. The de Gaulle family actually recently found a draft of the appeal, and just this month they handed it over to the National Archives, where it's on display, and it will soon be locked away, though, again, in a triple-door safe where France keeps its most important and precious documents.
So, Solange, the appeal of the 18th of June is largely considered, nonetheless, France's most famous radio address, and radio was and still remains actually a central central communications tool here in France.
Yeah, looking back on this moment, which was a turning point for France and also for the war and for de Gaulle as a statesman himself, Charles de Gaulle said, "La radio, c'est une arme redoutable," or radio is a formidable weapon. Again, this is an era before TVs in homes, let alone the internet. So radio was the main way, along with newspapers, of getting information out there. Today, of course, there are so many other media, but that does not mean that radio doesn't have a huge place in French society, culture, and its democracy. There are, according to the Cultural Ministry, some 1,000 private and public radio stations or channels here in France. And the French are big radio listeners and listeners in general. Some 42 million French people, or 8 in 10, listen on a daily basis, be it to music, some 35% in total, or to the radio, either live broadcasts or podcasts, which make up in total some 54%. That half there on the pie chart. That's according to Médiamétry's annual audio report. The French listen for a long period of time with an average of digital radio listening of nearly 2.5 hours per day per listener. Now, I mention this because the appeal of the 18th June, while it didn't create this attachment to radio, it is a significant moment in a long and continuing love of radio here.
Solange, finally, you're going to end with a play on words.
I am. We've established how important the 18th of June appeal is here in France and in the collective mind. And so, of course, there have been multiple parodies. And one of them is actually a call for legalizing of marijuana. Now, the word joint and June are pronounced the same in French, joint. Even if they are spelled differently. And so the newspaper Libération in 1976 published a manifesto called L'Appel du 18 Juin, Joint. Since then, there have been multiple pot-smoking events on the 18th of June calling for marijuana to be legalized. But again, when you say L'Appel du 18 Juin, or the appeal of June 18th, it is still in the French minds synonymous with a moment of hope and with a moment of resistance.
Charles de Gaulle would really struggle to imagine that appeal being put in a play on words with marijuana smoking. But hey, anything is possible. Solange Moujon, thank you very much.